Twice Upon a Time is the third time Stephen Moffat finished writing for Doctor Who, and this time it's for reals. I don't know where to begin with this one. I'm still not entirely sure what happened. I could talk about the offensive characterization of the first Doctor, the vacuous fan service, or how about the fact that there is no plot? But I guess the best way to sum it up is with this tweet from our very own Phoenix Smith.
I was expecting Doctor Who to be bad, but even I was disappointed.
So, the plot. I remember Dan joking about the idea that this episode would just be the Doctor standing in rooms talking to random Capaldi-era characters, and... sorry, Dan. There are so many things thrown at us that don't really make much sense, certainly not to any casual viewers. So, there's these glass death people saying hello, and time is like frozen, I think, and there's a bit with this Dalek called Dusty that I think we're supposed to know something about, and they go back to the war, but it's like a few hours later, even though it's frozen in time, so the captain, who is a dad to Jack Harkness or something, gets to live, and do you know who I really want to come through that door right now? Bill Potts.
I was about a third of the way into the script and I just thought, you know who I want to come through this door? I want Bill back.
Tell you what, you could cut this entire episode aside from the last minute and nothing would change. And what's the purpose of the first Doctor in this episode? Literally, his involvement in the plot does nothing to further the story. It barely influences the 12th Doctor's decision. All it does is make the character an abhorrent sexist. It's funny to think that 2 episodes before, Stephen Moffat, the same man that wrote this, claimed that Time Lords were above such petty things as sex and gender. Can we clarify, please, that the first Doctor is not a sexist? Actually, do you know what? F it. For argument's sake, let's just say he's a terrible, terrible misogynist. Let's just say that we don't ignore the odd comment that would be completely overlooked as 60s sensibilities, like we ignore the fact that it's not in black and white anymore, and the fact that it's not in 4x3 anymore, and the fact that the monsters aren't made of tin foil anymore. Okay, what should we do with this sexist character? Let's do jokes.
Well, aren't all ladies made of glass? In a way.
Oh, you cheeky woman hater. Classic First Doctor with your mischievous ways.
My boy! Isn't he adorable?
Because actually, no, that's not alright. If you're going to intentionally highlight something like this, you need to address it instead of playing it for laughs at the expense of the audience's respect for our lead character. Because what the First Doctor says throughout this story is not okay. At best, you're making him a lazy parody, and at worst, you're making this incarnation, and by extension, the Doctor himself, into a really unlikable person. By half the audience. There are no monsters for the kids apart from one Dalek squid attack. There's also no conflict in sight, something essential for any fantasy adventure. Hell, for any story. If there's one thing we should be thankful for, and this was a genius decision by Stephen, it's having the Doctor not be responsible for the Christmas Day armistice. It's instead utilised and sincerely executed as a plot device. But you can imagine it, can't you? It would have been very easy for Stephen, and in keeping with this Doctor's love for speeches, to have the 12th Doctor step out into no man's land and declare a ceasefire while pulling a football out from his inner coat pocket.
This is a regular-sized model of war! See this football? This is your planet, and your cruel, unkind, senseless fighting is deflating it! But not today, because today is Christmas, and Christmas is being kind. I am the Doctor, and I declare an armistice!
Yeah, thank God that didn't happen. We did still get a final speech though. Oh yes, you can't not have a speech. In the same way that Murray Gold reuses a lot of his famous motifs from the last 12 years, the 12th Doctor fittingly blurts out random phrases his predecessors coined. Stuff about pears and never cruel or cowardly. Peter Capaldi's performance is flawless despite the script, especially in that moment where he talks about children hearing his name. Written down it just looks naff, but his performance carries it. That said, I couldn't help wondering what children he's talking about. Children watch this show? I thought this was for grown-ups! Shall we just talk about Jodie now? I just want to talk about Jodie. That's the only reason I made this video. That and the fact that I was contractually obliged to make this thanks to some blood pact made in 2012. Let's face it, that last minute was all we were really tuning in for. That moment where we get to see the new Doctor's massive face! I love everything about Jodie Whittaker in this scene, from her fantastic accent and that big grin, right down to the way she jiggles her hands in excitement before booping that button. Chris Chibnall did everything he could to make a run-of-the-mill I've regenerated and now the TARDIS is crashing scene into something new, throwing the Doctor out of the TARDIS alongside all the props from the last 3 years. I kind of see it as a statement of intent, taking what's been established and shaking things up. And I'm excited with all the possibilities this brings. The Doctor is falling, literally this time, and the TARDIS is gone. Are we going to have the Doctor finding the TARDIS in her first episode, or are we going to have a series arc of sorts, with the Doctor travelling through space and time via unconventional means in the search for her home? We don't know how this is going to pan out, and you know what? I actually want to know. I care enough to speculate. Twice Upon a Time is an episode that can't be watched. It just sort of happens in front of you while you're on your phone. Farewell, sweet space prince. R.I.P. in space.